hide themselves saying, I'm a perfectionist, I wait, and you don't do nothing because you are scared of being judged. But in reality, most of the time, people don't care about what you are doing. In most cases, we are very lucky and we can really pursue something that fulfills us, whatever it can be. In my case, is music and space. Where in the same week or in the same day, sometimes, or one day after the other, I have a milestone in terms of scientific activity and a milestone in terms of music activity.
Hello, I'm Dustin, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Leonardo, the Space Pianist Barilaro. He's a PhD, space music composer, aerospace engineer, martial artist, senior lecturer, Italian polymath, and he'll be the first to play piano concert on Mars. Thank you for joining me on the Polymath Polycast.
Hi, Dustin. Thank you very much, and hello, everybody.
It's going to be great to have you on here. Like we were just talking right before the call, like you're obviously a polymathic person, polymathic personal brand. So I guess the first thing I wanted to ask actually is, what got you started on this journey of doing multiple different things?
Very, very early, because I discovered the music when I was 6 years old. The passion for astronomy when I was 9. I started reading books, above all by Isaac Asimov, and by the age of 12, I decided that I wanted to travel to space and play the piano, also watching our planet Earth. So from that dream as a kid, I took the step necessary to arrive there. So I didn't keep it just as a childhood dream. So I did my academic path. I got my degree, bachelor, master, PhD in aerospace engineering, and in parallel, I had also my academic formation as a professional pianist, as a concert pianist. And fast forward to today, I'm really happy that I never gave up, because it takes a lot of energy and resilience, and I'm doing both. This is why the Space Pianist. So not only already sent my music to space, streamed to Earth, and my target is to go to space and play from there, but there is also all the part that can go sort of the umbrella of space art cultural ambassador, so events around the world, engagement of people, engagement with space community, but also students and other polymaths like Merritt, that you
Merritt Moore,
ago, and specialists in both fields, so both science and music.
And I love how, because of your duality there, you have a lot of interface with the music world, but also the space world, and you're able to bring them together through your music. And I even was looking at some of your research papers, like as much as I could, at least, because a lot of it is beyond me, but looking at through them, it's like a lot of the practicality behind the aerospace engineering. And I love how, since you were a young person, you had that dream and you kept going through it. I had a similar kind of mindset, like for myself, young age. And so seeing someone else who's even like way more successful at pursuing their own dreams is inspiring to me, and I'm sure for others as well.
It's a way for me to put together the beauty of art with the practicality of the fact that as humanity now we are living this new space era, and we are literally on the verge of the possibility of becoming a multiplanetary species. To do that, every one of us in the field at least has to give its own contribution. In my case, as an aerospace engineer, I specialized in the field of space safety. So protection, mainly protection from impacts that can happen with space debris, above all around our planet. So my area is more on the structural part, mechanical part of aerospace. With that, since we are also launching more and more satellites, just to mention one big company, SpaceX, keep launching a lot of satellites. There are more and more missions, also private, longer missions. So space safety is becoming more and more demanding. So one way in which I can contribute to the field is with projects related or to the development of spacecraft shields, or like the most recent one that in a couple of days will be back to Earth, Astrobit, in testing a new technology to repair damaged spacecraft. So if you can repair a damaged spacecraft hull in orbit, you can extend the life mission. So this is the scientific part. And in parallel, I mean, not in parallel, in synergy, I am also merging the artistic part without a bit sending my music and streaming it, but also the real power of this way of doing things is in the events done here on Earth. So where I'm having more and more opportunity of presenting both as a whole. So not separating the artistic part from the scientific part. And I saw that in terms of sparking interest, works very, very good.
And the synergy, like you said, is helping people understand more. What was your mindset 5 years ago, and how have you changed since then?
My mindset, I can say that ideally speaking, is the same since I was 12 years old. Of course, we continuously evolve and we improve. In my case, 5 years ago, I was working on the seeds that now in these months are giving results. And as mindset, I already wanted to do exactly what I'm doing now. But I can say that getting more experience, getting also more better understanding of how the industry works, space industry and also music industry, I passed from a more linear approach to a more, let's say, bolder one. So taking up challenges that are more complex. So simply I am keeping leveling up what I am doing since a very young age. In practical terms, this translates in the fact that when I had my viva for to defend my bachelor dissertation as an aerospace engineer, in the same week I had also the final mega exam to graduate as a professional, as a concert pianist. That was in the same week, and that was a really stressful period.
Yeah,
Fun fact, this thing is following me till now along my life path, where in the same week or in the same day sometimes, or one day after the other, I have a milestone in terms of scientific activity and a milestone in terms of music activity. Last April, I was in Abu Dhabi to present from a scientific point of view at a conference, Astrovit. And on the same day, so in the morning I had the conference, in the afternoon I had the recording session of the two compositions that I sent with Astrovit to space. Another event was in June when I was in Houston to follow, because I'm the project leader, to follow the qualification test to get the experiment space qualified at Voyager Space and NASA. I finished those tests and very, very early morning of the day after I was on a plane to go to Los Angeles because I had the recording of the video clip of Moonseeds together with cellist Tina Guo. So also in that case, I had everything very compressed.
Yeah, and everything together.
Coming together. This is a part of the game. So I told her, why we don't make of this a virtue? And now at events, and the most recent one was 2 days ago, here in Malta, organized by the Italian Embassy, where with the government agency here in Malta following space project, I was invited as a space pianist. So I presented the project and I performed as a pianist. To switch is not extra easy, but I'm expert enough to manage, and I'm also having a lot of fun in doing it.
Doing that switch, I think, is definitely something that you have to acclimate to. And I think as a content creator, that would be really interesting for you to do more of, like a vlog almost. Every time you have one of those really busy weeks, obviously you're too busy to probably do it, but if you can make time,
Good point.
Yeah, but if you can make time, especially after maybe like once you finally like recovered from doing it, you could talk about how you did both in such a short time span and what strategies you did to incorporate both sides of you and how you had this field and this field overlap this particular time. And that way other people who have maybe not the same fields, but the same kind of disparate fields, you could have a good example to model after. Because I remember when I had Dr. Moore on the show, she was talking about how she would be doing her ballet stretches in her science lab. And so like while she was trying to wait for an experiment to finish, she'd be doing her stretches. And so she was kind of incorporating both sides, try to maximize time. And that's kind of what you're doing as well.
optimization. And in fact, with Merritt, we had the event at the beginning of November where I presented at the NYU Arts Center the project. And for one of the compositions, Black Hole, we collaborated. And the day before, because I arrived very early morning, it was 4 a.m. Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi was the day before the event. On that day in the afternoon, we had the only rehearsal that we managed to squeeze in, and she was in the break between two lessons because she is also teaching there as a professor. So it was very funny to see two polymaths they were playing Tetris together, but the show was amazing, and also her performance for Black Sun was really amazing. Also, the moment was really meaningful because we could show to the public what can be created when there is synergy between science and art.
What's even more beautiful than that too is like you both have two different kind of backgrounds. Like she's more quantum physicist and ballet, but you're pianist and concert pianist and aerospace. But the balance between the art and science you guys both have in common, and so by being together, you get to show that. And I just think that's something that's really interesting too, because even if you had the same fields, you're both aerospace and both pianists, you would still be two different people. Your experiences will be different. And so you're two different kinds of polymaths. And that's something that's really interesting in the polymathic topic of like, even if you have the same fields, you're different. And then how do you guys differ? What do you guys agree on? And when they are even more different, like I'm just saying, I don't know. I think I'm rambling here, but I just think it's super fascinating to see the different kinds of polymaths and how they interact.
For sure. Also for me to put that into practice with an actual performance on stage, for me was a further way to level up the game, because it is the Renaissance ideal, in my opinion, is really, really powerful and fascinating. So as humans, the usual tendency is to divide in different compartments and to not make them communicating. In reality, everything is connected. It's true that, as for us humans, we always want to try to see things as 0 or 1, not only in compartments, but also to simplify the most. In reality, we say, for example, there are hunters and gatherers. There are two types of people. It's not true. There are infinite shades in the between. And of course, there are the so-called generalist and who is also very specialized. But also here is to simplify, to make something where the mind can simply get a hint. But when you go into practice, you can get very specialized in more than one field and still have a generalist approach. I saw this in an indirect way where it's true I am a pianist, but as an artist I'm a generalist, so I have an idea on how to set up a show, what is required, what can be the needs of other artists or musicians, and also as an engineer. I am an aerospace engineer, but specialized in the mechanical side. But as, for example, system engineer of Astrobit, I had to always be very well aware of what was required by the software and electronic engineer, by who was doing the characterization of the material sample. So there is much more, and it's not something that only few people can do in the world. Everyone can do it. Is the approach that we have, and also how we decide to limit ourselves, because very often is a matter of limits that we put on ourselves. And I believe that I'm learning a lot from two other disciplines, which is freediving and martial arts, in particular Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because in freediving there is an aspect that is really fascinating, where you are with only one breath going down. And the brain needs to be trained to not give too early an alarm to breathe, because it's very unnatural for a human body simply to go down and not breathe. What freediving teaches is to really understand your limits. So we are not robots, we are not with unlimited supply of energy, but our limits are much higher than what we expect. So in freediving, you learn to really understand what you can do and what you can't do, and also how to improve. simply, for example, in the depth or the time you can stay without breathing. And in martial arts, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where people see a lot of applications also in MMA, you understand that when you are literally under pressure and the adrenaline and the so-called instincts kick in, also that is something that can be trained. And what we think are our limits in reality are much farther. And for me, this is what works for me. For everyone is different. But to understand that our limits are much higher of what we can commonly think, and also to understand which are our limits and how to improve them. So this on the long term, as a marathon, I think can go really, really long way for each one of us.
There's a few different things you've said that I wanted to kind of link together, because one of the things you were talking about is constantly evolving and learning, which is definitely a polymathic mindset, and knowing that like your limitations, well, you don't necessarily know where they're going to be at. Like I said, when you're free diving, I've taught swimming for over a decade, so I definitely get it. 80% of my swim lessons are teaching my students not to panic when it comes to breathing, because that's usually what happens first, right? And so realizing, hey, you can actually go a lot farther than you originally thought. You just need to practice it and learn it. And then the other idea is like a lot of people online, including myself, have been talking about how we're in this digital renaissance and we're able to adapt to these new changes. Like you were starting to make content, you were doing 365 days of making music. And so you're taking advantage of this online world using your skills, your polymathic skills, to try to like showcase yourself. So I definitely think that like being able to know that you have no limits, if you will, and be able to keep pushing yourself towards that.
I would add just a concept that we have no limits if we keep pushing them. So otherwise, it's like for physical training, for example, I wouldn't be able to run a marathon if I start now. That is something huge for me, for example, for my personal physical capabilities now, but it's something that maybe today I can run 5 kilometers without fainting on the road. In 1 month can become 10 kilometers and so on. So a sustainable development at a different pace, everyone has a different pace, is what allow us to understand that we learn and we become every day at least the concept of 1% better. That on 100 days is a lot. So imagine working on years and years of dedication like myself or Merritt, for example.
I definitely agree too. When it comes to progression, as a personal trainer and swim instructor, I always told my clients, I don't care if you make a big progress or a little progress, just as long as you make progress. And that 1% is all I looked for. It could be, I could have a client that was super difficult to work with one day or something like that. They were really not feeling great or something, low energy. They didn't want to do the work that day or something like that. But as long as they made that 1% progress, I was happy as a coach. And I think that's really key, because no matter what you do, no matter what your niche, your ability, getting that one progress forward so that you can actually make changes over time.
It's accountability and showing up. So for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we say show up. Doesn't matter how bad it can be the day. You get smashed, you are going to faint, but you showed up. That is what you can give on that day. And this is also my mantra, my concept of nullo die sine nota, which is poetic license from Latin, which is not a day without a note. So I have this mantra that now is several years that is guiding what I do in music, where the original sentence for Plinius the Elder, Roman poet, was the concept of writing at least one verse a day. So if you are a writer, a poet, how you improve is not because inspiration is something that magically arrives and you have talent. Yes, you can be talented, but the concept is every day you put in my case, at least one symbolic note as effort to be accountable with what you do, because there is also the very human tendency in giving the fault to outside events, where in most cases is not true. So in most cases we are very lucky and we can really pursue something that fulfills us, whatever it can be. My case is music space.
Yeah. It reminds me of that. I'm trying to tell myself I need to be right. I'm a writer, so I need to be writing every day, and I haven't been. So you reminded me to go do that.
Nullo die sine linea, so you can use the original sentence, not a day without a line.
Yeah. On your bio, it said designing the first piano concert on Mars. How do you think about going to do that?
So that is my long-term objective,
Yeah.
and I'm working. So that is where I want to arrive. To arrive to that, there is the growing both as aerospace engineer and also as artist, and increasing my, let's say, value in what I can offer, because it's always a two-way approach. So we give something, and in exchange we are part of a community that can also, that is what supports us in the end in realizing our dreams. Now I sent very recently for the third time my music in space that was streamed back to Earth. My target is to arrive at a point where I can test to play the piano in a suborbital flight, and after also taking advantage of the new private space stations that are in the workflow, so for example by VAST or by Voyager Space, to get an opportunity to be on orbit, so both as aerospace engineer and as a musician. In the meanwhile, we are all witnessing the development of SpaceX with Starship. It's true that the Artemis program got a setback, which is news of these very recent days, and this had to be expected. But on the other side, it is also true that for the Artemis mission, SpaceX most likely will manage to arrive soon in terms of capability of having a vector able to reach the moon. So the scientific community, not only SpaceX but also other private companies, are pushing the technology that is available more and more. And until a few years ago, considered impossible what now SpaceX is doing, and what also me as a project leader with Astrobit I took advantage of, which is SpaceX has been the first company that very few years ago managed to have a landing rocket, so a reusable rocket. If you have a reusable rocket, the prices are slashed down of at least one order of magnitude. This allows to much more, let's say, small players to access the market, to do research, to do also commercial activities in space. So now we are seeing something similar with the very fast development of Starship. And if on one side traditional channels of companies like Boeing are lagging behind and going very slow, finally, after years of just dreaming and talking, we are seeing the effects of technology improvements, which doesn't mean that magically we are able to travel to another star, to do interstellar travel, but we can really become a multiplanetary species, starting having a rocket system. So we're talking about a system in place that is economically sustainable, and that can lead people back to the moon, and after that also to develop the flight to Mars. So it is something where there is the technological scientific part, but always based also on the public perception. So if you have a public that is given the correct information in an accessible way, everything can grow.
Accelerate almost. Yeah.
Otherwise, is more difficult. So also nowadays we talk about having space influencers. I have some dear friends that in the space community are very active and are doing an amazing job. Space journalists, so journalists that are specialized and focused in space. We are also seeing channels like Everyday Astronaut that is covering the launches of SpaceX, that for the general public are doing really a work that is remarkable, and that above all allows young kids to get access to information that can inspire them. And in terms of space technology, if a young kid is, let's say, 5 years old or 10 years old, gets that type of inspiration, after 10, 15 years, can already give the contribution being at the university and after growing into a space professional. So the time range that we were talking about is in reality very short. So all these activities or what we are seeing thanks to modern way of communication, social media, your work with your podcast. So you can reach people everywhere in the world, and also you help to give to a person that has a certain type of interest a key to understand what to do to go where they want to go. And I think this is priceless.
Yeah. It seems like, especially in the U.S., there hasn't been motivation to become an astronaut since the space race back in the 1900s. And so it's good that we're definitely having a lot more changes now so that kids in particular, can be motivated to become astronauts again. There's actually reason to be motivated or excited to be an astronaut. And kind of skipping to another question here that's kind of related, being a multi-planetary species is something that Elon Musk is obviously very passionate about, and it definitely seems like a way for humanity to thrive. Something that's really important to me is becoming a Type 1 civilization. Where do you think our next step towards that goal is?
Now, the assessment is that in reality we are not so far from the potential of being a Type 1 civilization, but since I'm also an engineer, I have a very scientific approach. If we are very close if we consider the peak of what is our technology and the best that we discover. But we have also to be very pragmatic. We have always to consider an average. As average, in my opinion, we are still pretty far in the sense that the scientific development, of course, is not uniform around the globe, and also access to resources, education, and each country has its own problems, limitation, and point of strength. The very simple reply would be unity, but you have a unity as humans. We can have a unity if or there is a really big perceived risk at the planetary level. So there are all the catastrophic
aliens
movies,
attacking.
No, that is the second option. But talking about human life, there are all the catastrophic movies talking about global scale disasters. But at that stage would be in reality too late. You can only find some, middle ground to survive. Or another thing that not necessarily will unite all in the long term, but at least to face an adversity, would be we are able to identify a form of life that is not us, and we also perceive that form of life as threatening. Most likely, if this scenario that in science fiction is very often depicted, if this happens, if there is really an alien life form that is a danger for humanity, most likely we can't do nothing.
You're way too behind to really compete.
Technologically, we will be too primitive. So, best case scenario, we can end up in a zoo for them to be some.
Or just monkeys looking at the sky.
Yes, like some fancy form of life for them. So, what we are missing is, of course, still a technological development that is really able to use the full options that the planet provides. So not only renewable, but also better use, for example, of nuclear energy.
Yeah.
And a unity that I'm not talking about something like an utopia and saying, we have all to be, countries to love each other. This, I don't think that by human nature will happen. But a unity in terms, for example, of what happened with the revolution of internet, with the World Wide Web. That is something that united everyone, because now I am Italian based in Malta, and this podcast will be seen probably by someone in Japan, someone in Australia, someone everywhere in the world. So this is a tool that is really uniting us digitally. What we are missing, seeing this as an engineer, is a next step to have a sort of network in terms of using energy and resources that is really uniting us. So I'm not only referring to Amazon that can ship everywhere in the world, Temu and whatever, but also that is a way that is connecting countries in a globalized network. Sorry?
Fun fact, Leonardo. Before I started PolyInnovator, which is my personal brand, I haven't talked about this much on the show recently, but I actually worked on a organization that I was trying to make called the United Living Construct, and I made it to be a hub of polymaths as kind of like a global capital, if you will, or like smart city. That was the goal. Like you said that yourself, you had a goal from a young age. That's kind of where my goal was ending up. I always wanted to be CEO, or even just like a CEO of an international company driven to innovate technology and ideology. And that manifested as like this united living construct to be like a global smart city that could connect the world. That was literally like what you're saying there is literally what my goal was.
So keep it up. I mean, you are also, thanks to your podcast, you are meeting a lot of people and
Mm.
also making people discovering other people. And I think this has a huge value. A plan like yours, a talent like yours, of course, is something that you don't build in a day. It takes a lot, and
I think
everyone
years.
is. Yes, but I think is very normal because we are humans in a good and in a bad way. And I think that there can be unity and a global system like internet. We still didn't get there or understood really how to do it in terms to self-declare ourselves as a type 1 civilization.
Yeah, we definitely need to get a lot more stages ahead, especially like you said with the clean energy, and then even just being able to have that unification front. That's a huge thing because we can't even get the U.S. to unify, let alone the world.
Yes, of course.
How do you manage your multidisciplinary life?
I'm very disciplined and very well organized. And in time, I learned to cut off what are waste of times. So I think I'm having a very beautiful and rewarding life. So I have my moments of free time that I love to spend with my wife. I have moments of relax. It's true that, for example, last year this year has been incredibly busy, more than usual, because with Astrobit I leveled up the game, so it required me
Yeah.
a very intense effort. But what I do to be able to keep up both sides of me at a high standard is to be very well organized and also dedicating my time to activities and also people that really, in my eyes, really deserve it. So you cut off a lot of you cut off a lot of useless background noise because I'm sure that each one, if is able a bit to see from outside the life, there is a lot of noise and a lot of inefficiencies. And I'm not saying becoming like a robot, but
Yeah.
is also optimizing the time, but also in the way in which you use the time. So since a very young age, because I had the interest for it and no one told me to do it, I pushed myself to become very fast in reading and in extracting the concepts that I needed. How you do it? Reading a lot and putting the correct focus. In music, since I was doing a scientific high school, aerospace engineering, and at the same time in parallel the music conservatory, I had to learn on how to make an efficient use of the time that I had to play the piano. On top of that, involuntary, because I would have avoided it. When I was doing a university, a music conservatory, I was also wasting a lot of time commuting because I had there is 3 hours of train a day with changing trains, walking. So I had a lot of time that was not used to sleep or to study or to play. Plus, I was working part-time. So I had to make an agreement with myself in saying, okay, I want to do this. I have to find a way. And it is also there is an iterative process. And what I can do now isn't comparable at all to the level of efficiency that I had 20 years ago. So it's a process. And also knowing that only in the movies or in the marketing campaigns, there is the concept of a person able to give, always 100%. But I'm not a runner, clearly, as you can read from this chart. But for sure, no one can keep up with a sprint for 5 kilometers. It's no more a sprint. So being aware that it's a marathon, and that each day you have a different level of what you can give or what you can do, and simply accept it. So one concept that I also try to tell to my students is that instant gratification doesn't work unless in front of you have Nutella. With Nutella, I can do an exception because that is instant gratification. But instant gratification doesn't work in a medium long term. And what I always try to be is to be strategic and knowing also the amount of energy I have and how things also find a way to combine themselves along the road. So this is my approach that for me works. Not everyone is the same, so everyone has to find a way to flow through it if you want. No one is forcing to do it.
Well, the thing is, no one is the same. That is true. But I definitely think there's a lot to be learned from that. Because if you look like Benjamin Franklin, he had a very organized schedule. Even Da Vinci had sort of a kind of consistency to his schedule, although he was such a perfectionist and such a person who just would not finish projects, a non-completionist, if you will, that became kind of a negative trait for him. And so I realized in retrospect, like if I want to do more, or if you want to do more, we have to get past our perfectionism. We have to get past the idea of like, I can do more on this. It should be good enough as long as it works, or I've put everything I can right now into it. Spending another 10 years on it or even one more year on it is not going to make more than 2% difference. Then I should just release it as now, right? And I think that organizing your schedule, or I talk about knowledge management tools like Obsidian and Notion a lot too, organizing your life through these new mediums that you can do. I think that there's a certain degree of you can do it. You just have to learn how to do it. Like you said, you learned how to speed read and understand concepts more fluidly because you studied that skill of learning. And I think that's just like something people have to put effort into.
And also, you got a very good point. Very often is a matter of showing up in the sense of it's true that in theory each one of us wants to do better and better, but being extremely perfectionist, in my opinion, is also a sort of excuse to not to go out there. So it's the concept of a musician that waits 3 years before releasing one single. That one single most likely will not be good, because in the meantime you can take another musician that is, let's say, between commas, less talented, but that in 3 years puts out 20 singles. Of course, a single
or 365.
Or 365. But of course, single number 20 will have a level of craft much superior because it's an iterative process. And I have one of my mentors that is a great professor of astronomy at the University of Padova, now retired, that worked, was a PI for a Hubble Space Telescope or Rosetta mission. I mean, huge things. But one of his teaching, translated from Italian to English, is that perfectionism is enemy of the concept of something done very well. So it arrives at a point where you have to decide, okay, this is good enough. I put it out, and is an iterative process where, of course, there can be things that can be done better, but you put them out. And also is sometimes people hide themselves saying, I'm a perfectionist, I wait, and you don't do nothing because you are scared of being judged. But in reality, most of the time, people don't care about what you are doing. So you can do literally anything. On the other side, who is doing more than you is never putting you down. So in case you can get positive feedback, who is doing nothing, who is doing less, one lesson to learn is just to let people talk, because at the end of the day, nothing changes. So everything can be summarized in the concept of accepting of being human, and it takes time, but everyone can do it, accepting our human nature.
You could always redo whatever you thought needed to be more perfect anyways later on, generally. And so it's one of those things where, like I was saying, like Da Vinci was a perfectionist, and it limited him, I think, in the long run, even though he's one of the prime examples of a polymath.
He also produced a lot, and
Yeah,
we don't have everything that he produced. And
yeah.
also, what is a draft in his case compared to other things was a product, let's say, still
Way
at a level. So yes, it's
his
true, but in
parachute
any case, there
tank.
is a huge production. Another genius that is irrepressible is the Immortal God of Harmony. Johann Sebastian Bach. The production is huge. In his years of activity, also he evolved from already a god-like status to immortal God of Harmony, as Beethoven described. So these people at a very high level created a lot.
Yeah, and that's the one of the things where it's like it's easy for us to talk about in the past, like looking back. I mean, but obviously in their day they did a lot. Speaking of which, something I ask all my guests is, what is a polymath to you?
What we just discussed, basically. So the concept of embracing the human nature, in the sense that the Renaissance ideal was nothing that was created from scratch or out of the blue. Renaissance ideal was the concept of having the human nature as a merge synergy of our, let's say, rational part, so scientific part, with the creative one or the artistic one, where Leonardo da Vinci, with which I share the name, is the highest example in also in the public eye. So polymath is the fact that if you are lucky enough for not having other major sources of distress in life, because not everyone is born in a good place necessarily in the world. If you have this possibility and you have passions, a message that I always want to share is that not necessarily you have to choose. So if you are young and you say, I'm passionate about biology and ballet, the general tendency is, for which one do you find a job? Become a doctor, become a lawyer. This is just a hobby, the creative part. Now we are also living in an era where also the so-called creative job in reality can also be also much more productive in terms of income of a standard job. So in reality, this era we are living is very good, and I'm always happy when I see people challenging a cliche, you know.
Yeah,
So if you have a possibility, why to choose? Why to be forced by people that are born, of course, in the previous generation, if our parents, grandparents, or teacher, and that has a way of seeing life that reflects also their own insecurities. Because many times I meet people saying, when I was young, I played a bit of the piano, or I did the typical sense, when I was young, I did 2 years judo or karate. Okay, and after? If you liked.
yeah,
So it's true that sometimes for some people life can be really tough. I'm not talking about
yeah,
this type of situations, but it's also true that in the Western world and in what we can call rich countries, the possibilities in terms of education are a lot, and people that can grow and experience different fields after choosing maybe also to want to become a space lawyer, a space psychologist. So not necessarily everyone has to be like me and Merritt Moore, for example. So doing both. But if you experience that and you grow with that, you become much richer from a human point of view. And when you understand certain things, you share much more, because you understand that it is a team job. And also being lucky, coming from richer countries and from a privileged situation, because I'm Italian, I come from the north of Italy, so I never had experiences of a country with a war or extreme poverty. So in this type of situations, you can also give back. And an example is also the orchestra created in South America with poor kids. Gustav Dudamel is a big example that was taken under the artistic protection of Marta Argerich, so huge, important pianist. So you can have a way of giving back also through channels like internet. And I would be super happy if this video will get a comment, for example, from a high school student, I don't know, in Argentina saying, Dustin, very interesting. So nowadays, talking about how something global can help, we have the internet, so you have also access to educational content that a few years ago was impossible to get, and you have also possibilities to improve your own life and your own family if we think to things from a global point of view to improve, because when the average improve, everything improves.
Yeah,
this is my opinion.
I wanted to mention you set an example of a biologist and ballet person, and I had someone on the show, Eleonora Morato, who
I know her.
is
virtually.
Yeah, I interviewed her as well, and she was someone who is a plant biologist and a professional ballerina. So it's like, oh, cool, like prime example of what you just talked about there. And actually, you mentioned how with the advent of the internet, we have this opportunity for education. I started this personal brand, or this actually show started out on too, around doing your own self-education. I created my own do-it-yourself modular degree, and I made a framework for other people to follow. So if there is cool videos like podcasts or courses on edX, or maybe some kind of open courseware from some other university across the globe, and you wanted to put it together in your own learning pathway, you can. And that's something that I think that a lot of people can take advantage of. Even if you don't use my framework, you could use your own. It's just the fact that the opportunity is there.
Yes, is true. And it's also true that with the increase of possibilities, also the so-called background noise increases. So there is also, let's say, more quality content, but also more rubbish content. Where the next step is being able to filter, to have tools to filter what you really need, what is really effective. And I think the building of a solid personal brand is also what can help people to understand if you are simply there to put something out there and get maybe some economic advantage, or if you really bring a value to people.
Speaking of which, you spend a lot of time as a content creator to market yourself and your work. How has that been for you?
In the last years, also where I learned a lot. So let's say last 5 years from 2019, where I upgraded what I was already previously doing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes is very challenging in the sense that is very time consuming, as you perfectly know. I'm here, the camera doesn't show, but behind the camera there is a pile of hard disk with terabytes of videos, photos, and so on. So also video editing, photo editing, where also my wife helps a lot, is very time consuming. I see that the return, in my case, since I'm not like a fashion influencer, I don't target, to promote fancy brands, is in the growing of a core community of people that goes from polymaths to people that are moving their first step in more than one field, and the space enthusiasts. So, and also with some part of it is with musicians. So I see that this started to lead to an exchange where very often I get contacted by people interested in what I do, and I learn something new, I discover something new. So is all of this content creation is on one side, the high tier that you also can see on my social media is for my portfolio. So my, let's say, visit card with which I present what I do to the community. On the other end, there is also the part where I give an insight about what I'm doing about a project, and I get interest of people, and sometimes also by people that are happy to have a chat online with me, like now, about what I do. So it's more on a community level, excluding the part that is the more promotional material.
That's amazing. So on my other show, I interview content creators like ourselves, and something I ask on there is like, what tools do you like to use? So like for example, I edit on DaVinci Resolve. I'm curious to see what you edit on, or is there any other tools that you use that are interesting in your creator life?
My workflow for videos is with Premiere Pro
Okay.
mainly. Even more recently, I had an experience with DaVinci Resolve because I had Blackmagic footage to manage from the show in Abu Dhabi, and I found it really interesting. So in my to-do list, there is inspect more DaVinci Resolve to evaluate the transition. But for now, my workflow is Adobe Premiere, also because with my wife, we use the Adobe suite for Photoshop.
Mhm.
With audio production, I work with Cubase, mainly Cubase.
Ah, okay.
And for example, for interviews like this, I'm routing my camera through OBS.
Hmm.
So, and I have also my home studio where I have one main Zoom recorder, different Zoom recorders with microphones. Everything is connected. Here, the camera is not giving a wide range of view, but everything to be efficient, I need also to stream a lot of my workflow. So now I became very efficient where I have a piece of content, also about the color grading, audio editing. To most of the things are streamflow, and also when I shoot or when I set up the cameras, also in terms of settings, type of files. During the years, I learned how to maximize this, thanks also having luckily friends that are professional videographers, professional photographers. So every time, also when I collaborate with people, not only I work with them, but I try also to absorb as much as possible, seeing how they deal with an intense workload.
Feel free to always ask me questions. You can always DM me because I love tools. I actually created a whole second brand called PolyTools about
Okay,
tools.
this is very interesting. Great.
Yeah. I was also thinking like my brain obviously goes into the mindset of like which tools are best or like how can you improve workflows. And so this is unsolicited advice, but just saying DaVinci Resolve, has an audio DAW, not DAW, but like built into it to help you improve audio. It also has the color grading, like, studio level color grading into it. So it might help ease your process if you just move over to DaVinci Resolve and not have to use multiple tools. Maybe.
In fact, I'm interested in DaVinci above all for the coloring because it's also
Yeah.
how it was born. For the music part, so for the audio,
You have to do a DAW, yeah, in that case.
Adobe Premiere is good enough for recording. I use DJI Mic 2 for the
Mhm.
audio, like when or I do interview, I receive interview, or when I create content. As a musician,
You have to use a DAW though.
I'm a really, let's say, I want to get the maximum possible, so I go heavy with Cubase. To also, if it is a video of a live, let's say a quick video, since I can work fast with it, I always do a round of Cubase in my case to get the best possible product
Yeah.
with the material that I have.
Well, for you, you have to use both. It makes sense considering that you're a musician. You have to do both. Completely fine. When it comes to live streaming, I've actually been using Meld Studio, MELD, instead of
Okay, never
OBS
used.
because
Okay.
it's a much more streamlined and minimalist app. But there's also some really cool plugins for OBS that allow you to multi-stream, including vertical as well. And so I just thought I'd mention those just because like I know that you've done a lot of live streams and I know that you've spent a lot of time with that. And so maybe some of these new tools can
Yes,
help you just make it a little
of
easier.
course. I'm always absorbing, new
Ah,
things like also DaVinci. I mean, it's true. Is several years I'm using Adobe, but if I put in my to-do list is because I saw that for the coloring of the Black Magic, really took few seconds, and I never. So I thought, okay, let's put it in the list because I see the value in it. So I always try to improve and to have a much smoother and faster and with a higher quality content production, basically.
before I move on to the next thing here, one thing I learned at DaVinci Resolve is that if you press Shift L, it speeds it up, the playback, and that made a huge difference on how fast I edit these interviews because I always listen to things back at a higher speed anyways. And so by just pressing Shift L, it plays at 2x speed, so I can actually speed up the editing quite a bit.
Okay, okay. Now I have
Just thought I'd
the last of interviews that I did at the International Astronautical Congress. I wanted to do 8 interviews to 8 people that are also friends that I found very interesting for what they do, asking also their opinion, their take on Astrobit. And now I have the last one to edit. That is, of course, time consuming. I always want to do multi-camera, having a clean as possible audio. Knowing this is a good selling point that you can work double of the speed with editing.
oh, I got one more thing. There's actually a couple. There's many AI plugins actually for DaVinci Resolve and Premiere both that allow you to do like multicam automatically. You just press a button and it'll choose which cameras to use. And so I can send you a link afterwards. Yeah, I'm just saying, hey,
This is really starts to become more and more interesting because very often also when I did my project Space Piano Music Every Day, so publishing every day a release through DistroKit, so Spotify, Apple Music, and so on, and the video. It's true that I optimized my workflow, but having 2 years ago an AI tool helping with the cuts, because I always did the multi-camera, that would have saved a lot of time,
so much time.
a
Yeah.
lot of time. But at least I can say that I really know how to work with that, because if you have to put a conscious choice every time, you have to think about it. So let's put it like
Yeah.
this.
Well, when I do these interviews, I love doing a research phase. I try to do as much research as I possibly can, considering you have so much to offer in multiple disciplines. I love doing actual recordings right now. It's like, it's very natural for us. But then we get to the editing, and the editing process is one of the things that's the weakest for me. So yeah, I get you. Going to another question here. Is there any particular piece of music in your life that inspires you deep in your soul? There was one song in Mass Effect 2 that I sent you beforehand that really always hits me pretty deeply, especially when I'm working. Is there anything like that for you?
Depends from the period in my life. So for sure, when I was very, very young, was the music of Beethoven, starting from, seems a coincidence, but what is called the Moonlight Sonata, that has the famous adagio as start, and this was when I was 6 years old. Later, Bach with the Goldberg variations, but for example, I was 9 years old, I discovered Queen and the voice of Freddie Mercury, so songs like Innuendo. I was 9 years old, I listened to Innuendo, and that happened something. I was reading Asimov, I was maybe 11, 10, and I listened to Children by Robert Miles. So both compositions, I recovered them in my actual version of my show, Music from Space, because as a storytelling, not only are very engaging for the public, but really goes with the approach that I want to give to people with space art. More recently, for sure, Interstellar, or
Yeah.
as let's say, an adult musician, expert musician, is the music of Arvo Part, which is an incredible composer, but also I got starstruck by Stravinsky, music of Ligeti. So, as a musician, I always listened and digested from a lot of different sources, passing also through metal, progressive metal, death metal, thrash metal. So there are a lot. I also played in a lot of metal and rock bands. One of my mentors has been Jordan Rudess, which is the keyboardist of Dream Theater. So I had really the opportunity of having a lot of different influences, and in a different way, with a different weight for each, is something that is reflected also on the music that I do now. If I guess you gave a listen to Moonsits with Tina Guo, it is neoclassical and very cinematic Black Sun, where in the video there is the choreography and dance of Merritt Moore, is much more experimental and something that goes out from the, I say, pop cliche, what a listener can usually expect as average. So I have also this possibility of trying a lot of different things according to what is my mind in the moment, my intention, and my workflow.
It's definitely a lot of waves there, and I totally agree with the Moonlight Sonata. I was obsessed with it back when I was a young lad. And it's interesting to think about. My brain's already come up with different songs that I would be curious to see what your opinion are on too. And the wide range of genres. I think that's also kind of a polymathic tendency too, to be able to just take from
Probably.
different types of music.
Yes, probably.
So you mentioned Moon Seeds for the asteroid mission. You've mentioned the collaboration with Dr. Merritt Moore. Is there anything that's coming down the line that you're looking forward to that you wanted to share?
My next target is to up level the game, so to have the opportunity to do at least a suborbital flight that can be a stratospheric flight or a more parabolic flight with a rocket, and have the opportunity to perform during the moment of the peak altitude, so where there is microgravity, and later, of course, to I have this dream of looking at our planet, playing the piano, looking at our planet. And fun fact, when I will be able to reach that, this is a teaser, I will make public a story, because I had a very short period of my time where I was also a writer, when I was very young, where I wrote a short story where I was 12 or 11, I don't remember, by the way, 12, where I wrote this story where I was already seeing humanity doomed, basically. So I managed, because I was the main character of that story, I managed to build a spaceship to save a limited number of humans, because of course it was one spaceship. And after like 30 years, to come back to the planet that somehow probably was habitable again. And there is in this short story written in Italian, where I am seeing our planet and I am playing the piano. So it's something that I keep in a box since many years.
Maybe if you ever write like an autobiography, you could use that as the introduction.
Probably, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that to write an autobiography, you really have to give a lot to humanity to really say, okay, let's write an autobiography. I don't think I am so important, or I did enough yet to arrive at that stage.
You are important. You are important. But I understand that like you are very young still, too. You have plenty of life ahead of you to do more stuff. So I get that. It'll be when we're old.
Yes, but let's say for me, if I want to read an autobiography, is for example from Arvo Part, so from people that are really huge and that really changed something. But for sure, when I will get my opportunity to do my flight and perform, I will publish that saying, guys, it's nothing new. I was 12 years old and I wrote this story. So we publish the manuscript original that I still keep in Italian, and the translation in English of that story.
I also, before we wrapped up, I wanted to share with you something. I don't know if I've ever said this on the show or not, but my mom was always really a big fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which are all based on like the Renaissance artists. And I was this close to being named after our like mutual friend Leonardo da Vinci. So I was almost named Leonardo when I was a baby.
Okay.
Which is like, some random fun fact, but I was just like, I wanted to tell you because I wish I was. I wish I was. But anyways, thanks for coming on the show. This is Leonardo, the Space Pianist, and Dustin, PolyInnovator. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for this chat. I really enjoyed it. And I'm really happy to see what you do to the global community. And I'm sure that all this series of chats and interviews can be inspiring for a lot of people. And maybe you will inspire someone 5 years from now, someone that simply picks up on YouTube your videos and says, what is this? And gets an inspiration to go out there and try something different.
That's the hope. And where can people find you online if they want to learn more?
So my main website, so thespacepianist.com, or as a handler on all social media is the Space Pianist, or on LinkedIn you find me with my full name, so Leonardo Barilaro. And you find my music on all the main music digital distribution platforms, starting from Spotify. My YouTube channel, there are several videos. And I suggest everyone to go to listen and check the video done in collaboration with Tina Guo for Moon Seeds that was streamed the 25th of November, so not long ago. That, in my opinion, is a very good example of space-inspired music. That also has also a beautiful story behind it, and I hope that, of course, you will enjoy it.
I was listening to it while I was researching you, and it was really good. So hopefully you guys can go check it out. I got all these links down below for you, so if people want to check you out, they can find you. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much.